Welcome everybody to GitLab Kickoff. So where we are kicking off release 10.4. So if you don't have access to the document, you can see it on my screen here. So GitLab 10.4 is going to be the best release ever, not because we always say it every time, but because it's going to be the first release of 2018. So that's very exciting just in that, because we started 10.0 and now we are already at 10.4 moving into 2018. So a big part of 10.4, and for the next couple of releases, we're going to be doing a migration to Google Cloud Platform. So Josh is going to talk a little bit more about that in the second point here. But I just wanted to start off right at the top that this is a big initiative for GitLab, our GCP migration. And so a lot of teams are contributing to this effort. And so I wanted to call that out, that is an important initiative for GitLab. So first up, we're going to talk about discussion. So in the discussion team, we are going to continue on the portfolio management features. We are in 10.3. We are going to allow you to point or see issues pointing back to epics. So you'll see that very soon when we release that. But once you're using epics now, you'll be able to reorder the issues inside an epic. So that becomes very helpful in putting priority or indicating an order of which you are going to work on that issue. We're going to introduce the API for epics and continue to work on that as we expand on epics. So we wanted to make sure our platform has parity from an API perspective. We're going to, so talking about API support, we're going to bring API support to our highly popular group issue board now and allow our users to do even more in their own systems via the API. As I mentioned earlier, the discussion team is going to be supporting the GCP migration effort, and you can see that specific issue there. On the CE front, we are bringing rebase and fast forward merge to CE. That's a feature that has been in GitLab for a while on the EE side, and it's a very popular feature, and we wanted to bring it to our CE users as well so that they can benefit from that. We're going to be tweaking the merge request UX going forward in the next couple of releases, adding more features. So the very first one is allowing to view the sticky file path as you scroll down the merge request diff. And so a lot of these diffs get really, really long, and just knowing if you even within one file of that diff, it might not fit on one screen. So just knowing what file you are will be very helpful. Project list page redesign. This deserves just me clicking on it and showing you this great design that Hazel put together. And so it looks really fresh, in my opinion, very clean. You might have noticed in our labels sometimes things are falling out of the columns. This will definitely address that. So we're bringing this to the project list label page first, and we hope to bring it to the group label list page very soon as well. Beyond that, I wanted to mention we're going to continue to iterate on performance improvements, bug fixes, so you can click on these links to see those, and of course, styling updates that we bring to all of GitLab, whether it's empty states, disabled buttons, icons, and so forth. Josh?
Thanks, Victor. So as you mentioned, we have a large project underway to support a migration to GCP and also align more closely to cloud native architecture and values. And there's a lot of work going on. You'll see some other features and other work going on that's rolling up into this later on in the kickoff here. But one key point is that we are working to improve our object storage support. Right now, we save the files locally and then sort of lazily upload them to object storage. One of the goals we're trying to do is to remove the need for shared storage as much as possible. And so with this effort underway, we are working to go direct to object storage without requiring any type of shared storage in the interim. And this will help free us up on the architecture side and help to uncouple things from things like NFS. So really exciting work. And again, you'll definitely see some more things coming up that build up to this effort as well in the coming features like the build section. But for now, let's pass off to Camille to talk about CI/CD and the great things going on there.
Thank you, Josh, for that introduction. So, as Josh said, there is like GCP migration, which is like the key focus for us right now. And we, the CI/CD team, also take active part, and quite significant portion of that will be handled by us. For example, the first issue that we'll be working on is actually something that we introduced in 10.3. We introduced basically long needed backend changes to make job to have multiple artifacts. This actually greatly simplifies their management, enable us actually to consider everything that is attached to the job to be an artifact, which is like basically the true. The trace is also the artifact. And this is where we actually gonna work towards this goal, that even trace will be treated as artifacts that in the end will allow us to make them stored on the object storage. And there is some needed work to make it possible for us to access these traces from the object storage in like an efficient way from the application. But this is not the only thing. This is like another thing is like security scanning of the Docker images. During auto DevOps pipelines, the application is packaged as a Docker image. This image is then actually pushed to GitLab container registry. But this new feature will automatically check for any security vulnerabilities that can be like present in the image and notify you about that in the merge request widget if some of these issues were found. But this is like the part of our Kubernetes story about like Docker images and container registry, but there's like quite a big community contribution right now going on. This is one of the most requested features at GitLab CI. It's actually making it possible to have CI/CD runners assigned to the group. Something that is like probably very, very simple to understand is that you currently actually can assign the specific runner to your project. But actually, if you want these multiple projects to use the same runner, you have to go to every of these projects and enable this runner. Group runners actually is this kind of like a way for us to say, you are the team that are working on the bunch of the projects that needs, for example, the OS X machines. So you just create a runner for the group, and everyone that creates a new project in this group can benefit from that. This is not the only thing, because like production grade support for auto DevOps public projects. Something that we have today, that we only support public auto DevOps published applications on Kubernetes cluster. But actually, you can pull the Docker images from the GitLab container registry. But this is actually using the credentials that are ephemeral. And basically, this kind of prevents you from scanning your application further, or like recovering your application when some of the problems happens. So we do a first iteration to make it actually possible to, as long as your project is public, you will be able to freely use your Kubernetes cluster to run the application created by Auto DevOps. One of the features that will be like part of the GitLab runner, but not the only one, is the proper way to replace exec functionality. Some time ago, we thought about the exec function that you can use to basically run all the jobs of the pipeline locally on your machine without pushing to GitLab. And we are aware that this part of the GitLab runner functionality requires a proper support, because currently the problem is that some of the features that we introduce at GitLab, they are not reflected in GitLab runner exec. Our goal is actually to streamline this implementation to allow exec today to execute all the features of the job, but in tomorrow basically allow you to even execute the whole pipeline locally on your computer. Josh, back to you.
Thanks, Camille. That's really exciting stuff. On the Prometheus side, we also have some equally exciting things and a lot of work going into Kubernetes here as well. But the first thing we want to deliver is adding some proactive alerts for GitLab service health. So what we can do is we can start to configure alerts within the embedded Prometheus server so that we can kind of keep track of a few things that are sort of best practices and that you should be aware of. And then using the Prometheus Alert Manager, begin to send out some email notifications to a defined email address that in case any of those fire. And so essentially the GitLab server then needs some attention. So this is a nice way to try and reduce the maintenance, and that we can now give you some proactive notifications in case the GitLab server does need some attention. So that's really exciting work on the Prometheus side there. We're also going to be, as before, working on the Kubernetes integration with Prometheus as well. And so we'll be adding the option to deploy Prometheus from within the cluster management screen. So the great work that the CI/CD team did last release before to introduce the option to integrate clusters and then deploy basic services like Helm and things like that. We want to make sure you can do the same thing with Prometheus as well. And to accomplish that, we'll also have to do some back-end work as well to do things like supporting multiple clusters, as well as supporting connecting to the Prometheus server through the Kubernetes Service API, so it doesn't have to be exposed publicly on the internet. We're also going to be taking the opportunity to do some UI improvements as well. So we'll be moving more of the sort of point-in-time statistics. So when you mouse over the current chart, the values update for that point in time at the bottom, kind of in the legend. We want to move those up into the hover over flag, as you can see there on the screenshot. And then we also will then take the opportunity to provide some summary metrics down below in the legend as well. We'll also be doing some cleanup work on the merge request widget to handle some cases like initial deploys, as well as to better handle events where a deploy could take some time, and we want to better handle how that's represented and displayed as well. So some improvements there to the merge request widget for Prometheus. And then finally, we also want to do some work mainly to resolve a bug right now with the unimage Docker image where the Unicore metrics aren't currently supported. So we want to try and resolve that as part of this release as well, because we think it's really important that, of course, GitLab can output those metrics in a Docker format as well. So that's it for Prometheus, some exciting things. And then on to the build team, where the first thing we want to try and do is move closer to offering sort of instant SSL support for your GitLab server. So right now you have to go ahead and get your SSL certificates, put them into a certain location of the file system, and then edit the GitLab configuration to point there. And we want to try and make that easier. And so we've been laying some of the groundwork for introducing support integration with Let's Encrypt. And this moves us closer to that as well. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that your GitLab server is able to be reached from the internet, as that's a key requirement, of course, for Let's Encrypt to do its validation to ensure you have control over that domain. And so you want to add a check into the reconfigure scripts, and they'll go ahead and make sure that the configured URL is reachable. And this will be an extra little tool you can have as part of reconfigure to go ahead and kind of do this check. And that'll be leveraged, of course, in the upcoming support for Let's Encrypt as well. So really exciting stuff there to help improve the SSL configuration of GitLab. And then back on the topic of sort of the cloud native support and the Gcp migration, is we're continuing to do a lot of work on our containers that we want to use for this effort, as well as also our Helm chart. And we're, of course, going to not only use these for the migration to GitLab.com, but also, of course, we want to deliver these to our customers as well. So everyone can benefit, and we can all sort of work off of the same containers and the same Helm charts. So you can deploy a GitLab.com scale instance using the same tools that we did as well. And we're going to be doing some work across the sort of separation of the components into individual containers, and we're kind of finding some areas that we need to do some work along the way here. And so we'll continue to do that and continue to drive further. In particular, some linked issues around GitLab Shell and Gitaly, for example, will be where we're doing some work. And then just, of course, continuing to go further on the container side of things, as well as also work on some of the other infrastructure support, like we want to try and package a object storage system within the cluster in case you don't bring your own as well. So some exciting work there to help continue to drive forward on the containers and the Helm chart for, again, both like GitLab.com as well as all of our customers. Next up is we want to try and do some further improvements to configuring HA. And so, for people who aren't perhaps running on Kubernetes, for example, we want to make sure we can still give you a great experience in configuring and setting up Omnibus on virtual machines, how you typically do, or many folks do today. And so a great improvement we had was our role service. And so you can now go in and simply say that this node is a Postgres node, and then we'll go through and automatically for you turn off the other components and properly configure the most of the configuration for you. And this will save you a lot of time and potentially some fat fingering or some typos or missing some settings. And it's really improved the experience of configuring HA. And we want to continue to improve that service and that kind of concept in 10.4 here. And we also want to go ahead and examine other ways we can improve the HA experience, namely that we now have a console server deployed, mainly to right now to manage the Postgres HA service. But we can now also use that and leverage that to help to store additional settings, so you don't have to worry so much about having the same configuration deployed across all of your nodes. And so we'll start to try and bring some of those in so they can be centrally managed as opposed to having to worry about updating all of the GitLab files across your deployment there. So we want to try and, again, make sure HA is really easy to use and easy to configure and deploy. And of course, there'll be benefits as well down the road for us kind of centralizing these configuration aspects. So that's it for the build team. On to Mike for platform and what's going on there.
Thanks, Josh. That sounds great. I'm pretty short and sweet today, but I wanted to call out two things going on in the platform group. The first is, and we probably need to find a way better name for this, but it's external policy access control. And this is a fairly sophisticated authentication service where in sort of very regulated environments, such as in government, healthcare, and finance, there might be classification on a project that goes beyond what you're able to do in GitLab today, or even beyond what you're able to do in LDAP or Active Directory. And there are actually third-party systems that keep and maintain these types of classification and policy management. So what this will allow people to do is to classify a project with a particular classification tag, and then every time someone tries to access that project, in addition to the GitLab security controls, you can specify a third-party URL, and that will allow GitLab to go out to that URL, pass some credentials, pass some tag information over, and then that system, the third-party system, will allow or deny access to that resource. And so this basically allows these very heavily controlled environments to be able to use GitLab with the knowledge that people who aren't supposed to see certain projects or certain content can't. We're also doing a number of small UX improvements just to add some polish to GitLab. The one I really wanted to call out, because it goes right the way across the whole application, is just our confirmation dialogue. So some of these are even sort of JavaScript alert confirmation dialogues. Others have OK and cancel buttons in completely the wrong places. So you might have some muscle memory and click the wrong thing. So we're basically going through all of our confirmation dialogues and making sure that they're all consistent, everything's in the right place, and they look great. And with that, it is over to James.
Thanks, Mike. So the first feature I'd like to call your attention to that we're working on in 10.4 is related to the GCP migration and Helm charts that was mentioned earlier on, and it's backporting the authorized keys in the database support, which is currently in Enterprise Edition. So currently the default GitLab setup is to use the authorized keys file, which is stored on the file system. And for Enterprise Edition, we offer the ability to store that in the database because it's more performant for installations with large numbers of users. But storing these SSH keys in the database is much better for cloud-native configurations too. So we're going to be backporting this to CE. I'll just quickly share my screen so that you have some context for the next item, which is the multi-file editor. So the multi-file editor will be going into beta in 10.3, but in 10.4, we're going to continue improving that. And we'll be adding a bulk improvements to the bulk commit API to allow last commit ID to be supplied. And this will help us manage branches diverging while editing through the multi-file editor. And And we'll also be improving some notable things in the interface. So on the left, there is a file list which you can expand and navigate, and we'll be making that resizable. So, sorry, there's just a comment coming through. Is it a question? Okay. So we'll be making that resizable, and then on the right there is a commit panel, and so that commit panel can be expanded and collapsed, but we'll also be making that resizable. And so this is going to provide a foundation where the multi-file editor can be responsive to projects that are big and small with really deep file structures and long file names, and also different screen sizes where people might want to collapse things and provide more space for the editing buffer in the middle. We're also going to be adding, one thing we want to do is try and integrate the multi-file editor into different parts of GitLab and make it more than just an editor that sort of sits on the side. And one of the ways we want to do that is by integrating it into merge requests. So if you wanted to review a merge request currently, you could view the diff and leave a comment. But if you wanted to make changes, respond to that feedback, or review the files in a more comprehensive way, you would have to check out the files locally or open them one by one in the browser. And so in 10.4, we want to add a button to the merge request interface, which will open all the files that were changed in different tabs. And this will allow more comprehensive reviews. And if you're the, sorry, another question. Okay. Are you going to make, sorry, Camille, I don't follow which question.
No, it's okay. We're discussing, but nothing related to this. This looks awesome.
Sorry. Hey, James, maybe we can take questions at the end.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting distracted
no problem.
by the flashing. So yeah, rather than, one thing that's really frustrating about responding to merge request feedback at the moment is by the time you get merge request feedback, you typically are working on something else. And so if you want to respond to it, you've got to stash your files, commit them, check out the branch that you've got feedback on, close all the files that you were looking at, open the files relevant to the other merge request, and then push them all up. So it's a really heavy context switch. And most developers are often working on multiple merge requests at the same time, and switching between them to address feedback to get them over the line and merged can be a little bit frustrating. So we're hoping that integrating the editor into the merge request workflow will mean that responding to smaller feedback on merge requests can be done quickly and easily in the browser without disrupting the context in the local editor, where things are often in flux. So we're looking forward to adding that change and exploring other ways we can integrate the multi-file editor more deeply into GitLab and make it more than just a cool editor that's sort of isolated from the rest of the product. So that's it for the multi-file editor. We're also going to be working on improvements to LFS. GitLab launched LFS support about 2 years ago. But one thing you still can't do through the interface currently is tell which files are stored in LFS. And this can be a little bit difficult. So what we're doing is we're adding a little icon next to files in the file list, in merge requests, and in the blob viewer, so that you can instantly tell if the file is being tracked by LFS or if it's a standard Git object. We'll also be working on fixing a long-standing issue where tracking rules for LFS, so hypothetically all image files that are uploaded to a project should be tracked in LFS. The web interface, if the upload happens through that, doesn't respect those. And so we're going to make the web interface aware of those tracking rules when you do file uploads through the interface. Continuing the work on internationalization, we're going to be focusing on dates in 10.4 in the commit list and other areas through the product where there are timestamps. Currently, they're partially localized. Some aspects of them might use a word in the language selected in the user preferences, but often the structure of the date is incorrect. So the numbers will be in the wrong order with respect to the words because we're just doing a very dumb days is whatever. And so we're going to make the whole date string properly localized based on language preferences. So that's it on the platform team, but I will also update you on work going on in the Geo team. In 10.2, we had a massive release with both Geo and Postgres high availability becoming generally available. And so we're continuing to work on testing and documenting how to make Geo and high availability configurations work well together. So we're looking forward to getting those great features working well together. We're also working on hash storage with testing and hardening. So hash storage is a feature that was introduced in 10.0, and it changes the way projects are stored on the file system. Currently, they're stored using the project URL as the directory path on the disk. But where hash storage replaces that by using a hash based on the project's ID. And this makes the folder structure immutable even if the project is transferred or renamed, and means it's just a database call to update these things rather than actually relocating files on the disk. So we're aiming for general availability for hash storage in 10.5. So we've got quite a bit of work to do in 10.4 to test and harden. And we're also going to be working on disaster recovery in the Geo team. Geo was developed to make Git faster for geographically distributed teams by replicating GitLab instances in different regions. And so this foundation is really useful for disaster recovery, but it's quite different. So we need to spend some more time beefing up the verification tools that we have to make sure that the repositories and uploads that are stored on the secondary nodes are really correct, and that over time that files don't become corrupted or out of sync, and providing those verification tools so that if a disaster does occur, we can be confident the secondary is an accurate and up-to-date and correct replica of the primary. And we'll also be adding support for the promoting secondary nodes in environments where there are multiple secondary nodes. So this is a difficult technical challenge that we have to resolve, so that all the other secondary nodes become aware that the other secondary node has been promoted to a primary. So that's it for Geo. I'll hand back to Victor to wrap up.
Great. I think we had a question from YouTube. So the question is, hey guys, are you going to make CI logs manageable? Again, this is really, really painful not to be able to stop or resume auto scroll. So Camille or Mark, would you like to jump in?
I think it's handled in the chat, Victor, and I responded on YouTube. And people, please, if it's a question on YouTube, respond there. Don't make me copy paste it there. Like we should discuss there. I had a question about translation. Like if you look at the whole application, about what part is translated now? So what number of pages is translated?
It's about 50% of the sort of core platform pages, but it varies based on the specific area of the application. In the meta issue, there's a checklist of all the key pages that have been translated. And based on our current estimates, it's probably maybe 50%, probably a little bit less than that. There are instructions that are around contributing externalizations, and we're hoping the community might be able to help us out. And we've updated the contributing guide for first-time contributors to link to the different ways that they can either translate those pages or contribute externalizations. But release on release, we'll continue to have to externalize more pages.
Awesome, thanks.
Great. So if there's nothing else, thank you for attending. Thank you for the folks on YouTube for taking out your day, taking time out of your day to attend our kickoff here. So it's going to be a great release, first release of 2018. Wish everybody a great weekend and see you all next time.